The sound of heavy doors sliding open filled the vast chamber, and Daniel stepped inside feeling as if the air itself was alive with strange currents. The walls of the alien throne room shimmered like liquid crystal, and the ceiling arched so high. Above that it seemed to fade into a sky of moving colors that shifted slowly like the surface of a distant sea. Tall guards in armor made of iridescent plates stood in two perfect lines, their eyes following his every movement, not with hostility, but with the quiet weight of curiosity. Daniel had been on many missions since Earth had joined the greater galactic community, but nothing in his life had prepared him for this meeting. Years of tense negotiations and uneasy truces had finally led to this moment. The Varelians, the most powerful empire in this region of space, had agreed to a personal audience with their ruler, and they had chosen Daniel to be the one to represent humanity. He could feel the responsibility pressing against his thoughts like a constant weight. Every step he took echoed across the floor, made from some kind of smooth black stone that reflected his image in strange, distorted shapes. At the far end of the hall, the alien queen sat on a throne that seemed to grow out of the floor itself like a living organism. She was tall, her figure graceful, her skin a shade of pale silver that caught the shifting light and made her appear almost made of moonlight. Her eyes were golden with pupils shaped like tiny stars, and when they locked onto him, he felt a sharp shiver run down his spine. Yet there was no coldness in her gaze, only a strange warmth, mixed with something unreadable. He came to a stop at the base of the steps leading up to her throne, and bowed slightly as protocol demanded. The queen lifted one delicate hand in a gesture for him to rise, and her voice, when she spoke, carried through the chamber like music, yet every word was in perfect English human. She said with a softness that felt like a secret shared between them, "I have watched your kind from afar. I have seen your courage and your resilience. I have chosen you." Daniel's heart was beating faster. Now this was more than formal greeting. There was intent in her words, something personal. He straightened, trying to keep his voice steady. "Your Majesty," he said, "I am honored to be here on behalf of Earth." She tilted her head slightly, the golden light in her eyes shifting. Then, without pause, she spoke the words that made the air in the room feel suddenly heavier. "Human, marry me." The courtiers around the hall reacted instantly, their whispering rising like a breeze through leaves, and their shimmering fins fluttered in agitation. Daniel froze, trying to make sense of what he had just heard. His mind scrambled for the right response, but before he could speak, the queen continued, "And take my sister too." The chamber grew utterly still, as if even the air had stopped moving. Daniel looked at her in shock, wondering if perhaps his translator implant had made a mistake, but the steady, unblinking gaze of the queen told him she had meant exactly what she said. A marriage in her culture, he remembered from briefings, was not only a union of two individuals, but a binding of entire peoples, and to offer her sister alongside herself was something beyond rare. It was a gesture so immense that even the other Varelians in the room seemed unsettled. Daniel's mind was racing. The implications were enormous. This was not just a personal proposal, it was a political act, one that could decide the fate of relations between Earth and the Varelian Empire. If he refused, he risked insulting the queen and possibly destroying the fragile peace. If he accepted, he would be tied to a world and a culture he barely understood. The queen's voice softened, but there was a weight in it, like the pull of a deep ocean. "I do this not only for my heart, but for the future of both our peoples," she said. "My sister will be here shortly for you to meet. She will stand with me in this bond as tradition demands, and together we will make our worlds as one." From the corner of his vision, Daniel noticed movement. The heavy side doors of the throne room began to open again, letting in a cool current of air, and a figure stepped through. She moved with the same grace as the queen, though her presence felt different. There was a sharper energy to her steps, a precision in her gaze. Her skin was the same silver hue, but her hair was darker, a deep metallic shade that reflected less light. Her eyes, however, were unlike the queen's, not golden, but a deep shade of green with flecks of bright silver like shards of ice. The queen's expression softened as her sister approached. The courtiers bowed their heads, though Daniel noticed a subtle tension ripple through the room, as if the arrival of this second royal had changed the balance of something unseen. The sister reached the base of the throne steps and turned her gaze to Daniel, studying him with an intensity that made him feel as if she could see far beneath the surface of his thoughts. Daniel had come here expecting negotiations, discussions, perhaps guarded exchanges of words. Instead, he found himself standing at the center of a proposal that could alter the course of human history. The sister's lips curved slightly, not quite into a smile, but not unfriendly either. The air between them seemed charged, and Daniel realized in that instant that whatever happened next would shape not only his own future, but the fate of two civilizations. Daniel stood in the grand hall with the eyes of an entire alien court fixed upon him. The silence stretched out as if the air itself was holding its breath. The queen's sister now stood beside her throne. The difference between the two was like moonlight and shadow. The queen shone with warmth and grandeur, her presence almost comforting despite the power she carried, while her sister held a sharper presence and aura that seemed to cut through the space between them. The queen spoke again, her voice carrying to every corner of the hall. Daniel, this offer is not made lightly. It is the highest honor of my people that I share my bond and blood with another. My sister joins this bond so that no part of my family stands apart from yours. In our culture, such a union binds not only hearts but worlds. It ensures that both peoples will be as one forever. Daniel heard the gasps from the gathered nobles, who shifted slightly, their shimmering fin-like crests fluttering in disbelief. He could see that even among her own kind, this was an unusual move, perhaps even controversial. A faint ripple of unease moved through the line of guards, though their expressions remained still. The queen's words carried not only meaning but political weight, and Daniel felt the pressure of it settle on his shoulders like an invisible mantle. His mind raced with memories of the war that had almost destroyed Earth. Entire cities had been lost and millions of lives had been erased in a conflict that had burned too bright, too fast. The fragile truce they now held was the result of years of tense diplomacy. Every meeting had been a careful step over dangerous ground, and now here he was faced with a decision that could either seal a lasting peace or undo everything that had been built. The queen's sister remained silent, studying him with eyes like polished emeralds flecked with silver. Her gaze did not waver, but in it he thought he saw something unspoken, something that might have been warning or challenge. He wondered if she approved of this union, or if she was being drawn into it against her will. Daniel finally found his voice, though it felt as if it had to push through the weight in his chest. Your Majesty, I understand the honor of your proposal and the trust it represents for my people and for me personally. But this is not a small decision, and I would not treat it lightly. The queen's eyes softened, but her tone remained steady. I do not expect an answer this moment, human. You will have time to think, but understand that my offer is not only from my heart, but for the survival of our worlds. There are forces beyond this hall who would see us divided and at war again. I will not allow that to happen. The bond I offer will make division impossible. Before Daniel could speak again, the queen lifted one hand toward the heavy golden doors, and the court parted to let in attendants carrying trays of shimmering fruits and crystal decanters filled with liquid that glowed faintly like captured starlight. The air filled with strange aromas, some sweet, others sharp and bitter. A feast was being prepared, and Daniel realized this was no casual meeting. It was a formal declaration that the queen intended to join her life with his, and to show the court that this decision was public and unshakable. He took a seat at a long table carved from a single piece of dark living wood. The queen sat at the head with her sister beside her. Daniel was placed on her other side, a position of great honor, yet also of great exposure. He could feel every glance from the courtiers, who whispered in tones too soft for him to catch, though he had been Trained to read alien expressions, the Varelians were skilled at hiding their thoughts. As the meal began, Daniel tasted foods unlike anything he had known before. Some dissolved into bursts of flavor the instant they touched his tongue, while others seemed to change taste with each bite. The queen laughed softly when he reacted to a particularly strong spice, but her sister remained quiet, occasionally speaking to attendants in their flowing liquid language. Halfway through the feast, the sister turned to him and spoke in English, though her voice was low enough not to carry. Beyond them, if you value your world, tread carefully. The bond my sister offers is a gift, but gifts can be chains. She held his gaze for a moment longer before looking away, leaving Daniel with a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. He glanced at her, wondering if she was warning him for his own sake or simply testing his resolve. Before he could decide, the queen rose from her seat and addressed the court. Tomorrow at first light we will begin the rites of unity, so that our worlds may see and understand the bond we choose. The court will witness the joining of hearts and the promise of peace forever. Room filled with a low hum of approval, though Daniel noted that not every face looked pleased. Some nobles kept their eyes lowered, others exchanged brief glances that spoke of hidden agendas. He knew enough about politics to recognize that such a union might create enemies as well as allies. As the feast ended, Daniel was escorted to a private chamber of polished silver walls and a floor that glowed faintly beneath his feet. It was luxurious, far beyond anything on earth, but the beauty of it did little to calm his thoughts. The queen's offer weighed on him heavier than any armor he had worn. In the past, he lay on the soft alien bed, staring at the ceiling that shifted like a slow-moving sky, and wondered if peace with the Varelians would truly come from such a bond, or if he was stepping into something far more dangerous than war. The chamber was quiet, except for the low hum of unseen machines hidden behind the silver walls. Daniel could not sleep, for his mind was caught in a web of questions that pulled him from one thought to another, without rest. A queen's words replayed in his memory as clearly as if she stood before him again, yet it was the sister's warning that would not let him go. Gifts can be chains. The sentence kept circling in his head like a shadow that would not leave at the first light of the alien morning. A soft chime sounded, and the door to his chamber slid open, revealing two attendants. Their skin carried faint green patterns that pulsed in rhythm as they bowed and gestured for him to follow. He was led through curved corridors that glowed faintly with shifting light until they reached a garden unlike any he had ever seen. The air was warm and carried scents both sharp and sweet. The plants seemed half alive in ways he understood, and half alive in ways he did not. Some unfurled their petals when he passed, others tilted as if listening to his footsteps. The queen was not there, but her sister stood beside a pool of water, so clear it looked like glass. She wore no crown and no ceremonial robes, only a simple garment that shimmered faintly with each movement. When she turned to him, her green eyes caught the light and seemed brighter than the day itself. "You came," she said in a voice that was softer than it had been at the feast. Daniel stopped a short distance from her, unsure if this was another formal meeting or something far less official. "You told me to tread carefully," he replied. "I want to know why." The sister stepped closer, the surface of the pool reflecting them both. "The queen loves her people," she began, "and she believes that this bond will keep them safe and keep your world safe as well. She is not wrong, but she does not see everything. There are those in the royal council who want more than peace. They want control, and they will use this union to gain it." Daniel's chest tightened. He had expected some level of politics in such an offer, but the way she spoke carried the weight of deep knowledge. "Who are they?" he asked. She shook her head. "Not here, not where the walls can hear. But know this, if you bind yourself to my sister in the way our traditions demand, you will be bound by law to obey the council in all matters concerning the empire, and your world will be drawn into our wars not as an ally, but as a vassal." The word vassal echoed in his Thoughts he imagined Earth reduced to a subordinate territory, its leaders forced to obey alien decrees. The image burned in his mind, yet he also remembered the Queen's warmth and the sincerity in her voice. Could she truly be blind to such a threat, or was she willing to ignore it for the sake of unity? The sister's gaze did not waver. "I do not want my world to take yours as its servant," she said. "I want true peace between us. But if you refuse the Queen's offer, it will be seen as an insult, one so great that even she may not be able to stop the anger of the council. The truce will shatter and war will return." Daniel looked at her and saw no deceit in her eyes, only urgency. It left him trapped between two paths, one lined with danger hidden behind silk and gold, the other lined with the smoke and fire of open conflict. Before he could ask more, a faint sound carried through the garden like the chiming of crystal bells. The sister stiffened and lowered her voice. "We are watched." Now she turned toward the pool and spoke in her own language, her tone shifting into the smooth flowing rhythm of formal speech. Daniel understood none of it, but her eyes flickered toward him with meaning he could feel if not translate. A group of courtiers entered the garden, their shimmering fins lifting in polite greeting. They brought with them a sealed container made of some translucent material. Inside, Daniel could see a single glowing crystal, no larger than his thumb. It pulsed slowly, with light like a living thing. The eldest courtier stepped forward and held it out to him. "This is for you, human. It carries a message from the Unity Council for your eyes only." Daniel took the crystal, feeling the faint vibration in his palm. Courtiers bowed and left as silently as they had come. The sister gave him a look that seemed to say, "Be careful," without a single word spoken. He hid the crystal within the folds of his jacket and followed her back through the corridors toward the throne room, where preparations for the Unity ceremony had already begun. By the time they reached the Great Hall, workers were hanging long banners woven from threads of light. Each banner carried patterns that shifted slowly, telling stories of Varelian history. The Queen sat at the far end, speaking with her advisors. She greeted Daniel with a warm smile, as if nothing in the world could trouble her. "The ceremony will be beautiful," she said. "It will show all that our peoples are as one." Daniel managed a polite nod, but inside his mind was already on the crystal hidden in his jacket. He needed to know what it contained, and he needed to find out before the rites began. If the sister was right, this message might reveal what awaited Earth once the vows were spoken. That night, back in his chamber, Daniel activated the crystal. It unfolded in the air above his hand, casting faint blue light across the walls. A voice spoke in a language he could not understand, but the translator implant in his ears shifted it into words that made his blood run cold. "They will use you. They will crown you as the figurehead of a human ascendancy, but you will have no power. Earth will belong to the Empire, and you will be bound to obey." The voice faded, and the crystal crumbled into dust, leaving no trace behind. Daniel sat in the silence, his thoughts heavy with the knowledge of what the sister had warned him about. The Queen's offer now seemed both a gift and a trap, and the choice he would have to make was coming faster than he had hoped. The night after the crystal's message was the longest. Daniel had known him years. He lay awake in the silver chamber, staring at the ceiling that shifted like slow water. His mind moved between the Queen's voice, warm and full of hope, and the cold warning from her sister that rang with quiet urgency. The message from the crystal played again in his thoughts. "They will use you. They will crown you as the figurehead of a human ascendancy, but you will have no power. Earth will belong to the Empire, and you will be bound to obey." It was not a guess. It had been said like a truth already decided. When the first light of day touched the glowing floor, the attendants came for him. Their movements were graceful, yet their eyes avoided his as if they carried orders. They did not wish to speak. He was led not to the throne room, but to a high chamber with open walls where the view of the alien city stretched to the horizon. Spires of glass and silver rose like frozen lightning, and streams of light moved between them, carrying thousands of Varelians in floating platforms. The beauty of it all felt heavy now, because he could see beneath it the machinery of a great empire that could just as easily crush as protect. The queen arrived not long after, dressed in ceremonial robes that shifted color with her every movement. She walked toward him with a smile, yet Daniel noticed the faint lines of tiredness near her eyes. Perhaps the pressure of the council was heavy on her too. She took his hands in hers and spoke softly. "Human, the council is restless. Some fear that our worlds are too different to unite. Others see this bond as our greatest chance to stand strong against our enemies. The ceremony tonight will silence their doubts and bring peace for generations." Daniel wanted to believe her. He wanted to think that her words came from truth and not from the weight of politics, yet the sister's warning and the crystal's message stood between them like a shadow. He asked her if the council would truly respect Earth's independence after the bond was made. She hesitated only for a moment, but he saw it, and that moment was enough to plant a deeper doubt. She said, "The council will do what is best for the empire, and for you as part of it." Her voice was warm, but the meaning behind the words chilled him. Later, he was escorted to a quiet hall where the sister waited. Her expression was calm, but her eyes carried urgency. She asked if he had seen the message. He nodded. She said, "Then you know the truth. If you go through with this, as they wish, you will not be a bridge between worlds. You will be a chain between them." The queen believes she is protecting both peoples, but she is not the only one who will shape the future after the vows are spoken. The council will bind you with laws that you cannot break without breaking the peace itself. Daniel asked her what choice he had. If he refused, he would bring war. If he accepted, he would bring chains. The sister looked toward the high windows where the alien sky shifted in slow waves of color. "There may be another path," she said, "but it will not be without risk. If you speak during the ceremony and change the terms of the bond before the council and the people, they cannot reject it. Without losing face before the galaxy, you must give them something they can accept, yet twist it so it protects your world." Her words struck something in him. He had seen negotiations fail because one side felt they had been forced to surrender. But if both sides could claim victory, the peace would hold. He asked her if she would support him. She said, "I will stand beside you when the moment comes, but you must speak the words yourself. Only you can carry the weight of them before the court." The rest of the day passed in a slow storm of preparations. The throne room was transformed into a place of dazzling light. Banners of living thread hung from the walls, carrying shifting patterns of stars and seas. Musicians played instruments that shimmered with each note filling the air. With a sound that seemed half music and half the voice of the wind, the queen was dressed in layers of silver and white, her crown a circle of light that floated above her head. The sister wore green and black, her presence quiet yet steady at the queen's side. As the hour of the ceremony drew near, Daniel stood before the great doors, his heart beating in slow, heavy thuds. The attendants moved around him, adjusting the dark, formal cloak. He wore the fabric humming faintly with stored energy. He looked at the doors, knowing that once they opened, every eye in the hall and beyond would be upon him. The choice he made inside would carry through the galaxy. The horns of the court sounded, and the doors parted, revealing the hall filled with thousands of Varelians. Their fins glimmered in waves of color as they turned toward him. Above the crowd, high platforms carried observers from other worlds, and in the shadows behind them, the council sat watching with eyes that missed nothing. The queen stood on the dais, her hands extended toward him, the sister beside her. Daniel walked forward, each step echoing through the vast space. His mind was steady now. The path was dangerous, but he would walk. I reached the dais and took the queen's hands, feeling the warmth of her skin and the faint hum of energy that passed between them. High Speaker of the court began to recite the words of the bond, a flowing rhythm that spoke of unity, loyalty, and eternal peace. Daniel listened, but when the moment came for him to speak the response, he did not give the simple acceptance they expected. Instead, he lifted his voice so that it carried to the highest reaches of the hall and beyond, through the countless listeners watching from across the empire. "I "Accept the bond with the Queen," he said, "and I offer my life to the peace between our peoples, but I also ask for a bond of a different kind with her sister, not of marriage, but of shared duty. Let her be the voice of Earth in this empire, as I will be the voice of the empire to Earth. Let us bind our worlds with two bridges, not one, so that neither stands above the other, but side by side." The hall fell silent so completely that even the soft hum of the banners seemed to fade. The Queen looked at him in surprise, her golden eyes wide. The sister's gaze was steady, her lips almost forming a smile. The council members whispered among themselves, some in clear anger, others in deep thought. The High Speaker hesitated, then repeated Daniel's words as part of the ceremony, sealing them into the record of the Empire. The law was clear once spoken and repeated in the rites. The terms became part of the bond itself. The Queen squeezed his hands, her expression unreadable, but Daniel thought he saw the flicker of something like respect. The ceremony was not over, but the shape of it had changed, and Daniel knew that the final part of this game was still to come when the vows were sealed before all worlds. The silence in the throne room stretched on after Daniel spoke his words. It was a silence that felt alive, carrying the weight of countless eyes and unspoken thoughts. The banners high above swayed gently, though there was no wind, as if the living threads themselves were listening. The Queen's hands remained in his, her gaze steady, yet deep with thought. Her sister stood beside them, her green eyes calm but bright, as though a spark had lit within them. The council sat still, their faces masks of control, but Daniel could sense the storm beneath their stillness. The High Speaker turned to the council and asked if there were objections to the change in the bond. The question hung in the air, and for a long moment, no one spoke. Daniel knew they were calculating, weighing the danger of accepting his terms against the danger of rejecting them in front of the entire empire and the many foreign observers above. The law was clear once the change was spoken and repeated in the rite. The only way to reject it would be to break the ceremony entirely, and doing so would be a public humiliation. One council could not afford. Finally, the eldest member of the council rose. His voice was deep, like stone grinding against stone, and it carried to every ear in the hall. "The council accepts the revised bond," he said. "It will be recorded in the archives of the Empire and recognized by all worlds." The sound of his voice was followed by a wave of shifting colors through the court as the courtiers signaled their acceptance. Some of the colors carried warmth, others were sharp and cold, but none dared speak against it openly. The High Speaker continued the ceremony with a voice that seemed steadier now than before. He called upon the witnesses to remember this day and the vows spoken. The Queen repeated the words of unity, placing her hand over Daniel's heart, and he did the same for her. The sister stepped forward when called and spoke the vow of shared duty, her voice clear and unwavering, declaring that she would stand as Earth's voice in the Empire and protect its freedom as fiercely as she would protect her own people. The hall glowed brighter as the living banners shifted into new patterns, ones that told the story of this very day. When the final words were spoken, a deep chime sounded from somewhere far above, a sound that rolled through the hall like the toll of a bell. Daniel felt the weight of the moment settle on him. He had not only avoided the trap of becoming a powerless figurehead, but had also bound the Empire to a form of alliance that could not easily be twisted without breaking their own law. He looked at the Queen and saw in her eyes a recognition that he had played the game as carefully as any courtier of her world. After the vows, the feast began, but it was different from the one before. The tension had eased, replaced by a current of cautious approval. Nobles approached him, offering polite words, some genuine, others calculated. The Queen remained close to him, speaking with guests and introducing him to leaders from other worlds. The sister stayed near as well, and in quieter moments, she would give him the smallest nods of acknowledgement. As the evening stretched on, Daniel stepped away for a moment to stand near one of the high balconies. The view beyond showed the alien city lit with thousands of points of light floating between towers like fireflies on unseen winds. The air was cooler here, carrying the scent of flowers from the gardens below. He heard footsteps and turned to see the sister. Approaching, she stood beside him in silence. For a moment before speaking, "You chose well, human. You gave them something they could not reject without losing face, and you gave Earth a shield that even the council will hesitate to test." Daniel asked her if she thought the queen would be angry. She shook her head. "My sister is many things, but she is not blind. She saw the wisdom in your choice, even if she did not expect it. And perhaps she will come to see that this way the bond will be stronger, because it is built on respect and not on chains." They stood there for a while, watching the lights drift between the spires, and Daniel thought about the road ahead. This was not the end of the story, but the beginning of something far larger. The empire was vast, and its politics were as deep and shifting as the ocean, but now Earth had a place within it, not as a servant, but as a partner. The dangers were not gone, but neither was the hope. When he returned to the hall, the queen was waiting. She looked at him with a faint smile, one that carried both pride and challenge. "You are not like the others who have stood before me," she said. "You see the paths that are not shown, and you walk them without fear. I think our worlds will be stronger together than I imagined." Daniel inclined his head and said quietly, "I will do everything I can to make sure of it." They held each other's gaze for a long moment, then turned to face the court. Together, the hall erupted in a final chime of approval as the living banners shifted once more into a design that merged the symbols of Earth and the Empire. Later, as the guests began to leave and the light in the hall dimmed, Daniel found a quiet corner for himself. He thought of the journey that had brought him here, from the tense negotiations on Earth to the glittering halls of the alien citadel, and the impossible choice that had waited for him at its heart. He had walked the line between peace and betrayal, and for now peace had won. The sister passed by, and for a moment her hand brushed as a silent reminder that she too would keep watch over what they had built. The queen spoke with the last of the nobles, her crown still glowing faintly above her head. The court was dispersing, but Daniel knew the memory of this day would not fade quickly. It had been more than a union, more than a ceremony. It had been a statement to the galaxy that even in a place ruled by ancient powers, a human could stand and shape the path forward. As he left the hall, walking through the tall doors into the cool night air of the alien city, Daniel felt the weight of his new role settle on his shoulders. But it was not the weight of chains, it was the weight of choice, and he carried it willingly, knowing that sometimes the greatest strength a human could offer was not force, but the courage to find another way. The end.